How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 332 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode, as we head into the June bank holiday weekend, is the seed sowing guide for the month of June. And it's a good episode. It always serves as a kind of reminder for people as we enter the new month what can be sown. And this month is no exception. There's lots to be still sown. The list is reduced slightly to last month. The month of May is always kind of the biggest month where we can sow the most things, but still June is a lot. There's a lot on the list, and given that the weather through a lot of April and May was so cold, this list is actually kind of important now, really important because we can get longevity. There's still things that technically, by the back of the packet might say it's a little bit late, but given how cold things were, if you sow now with the temperatures that we've had, a way off we'll go and we'll be up and running very, very quickly. Before we get into what we can sow, little mention this for this week's episode sponsor, it's Seeds Ireland, and a very apt sponsor for the seed sowing guide. So Seeds Ireland are an Irish company, and they sell basically all types of seeds. So you have vegetable seeds, flower seeds, herbs, microgreens, and lots of other pieces of equipment and gardening sundries as well. So lots of products. I've used them myself personally, as I said before. Very good quality seed, always good germination rates. Five-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot, so that's a big thing now, especially for people who are buying online. You have that trust piece. Really high germinations, as I mentioned, good range to choose from, very fast delivery, within a couple of days. And, they have quite a big range, and I'd say it's a range that's growing all the time. Generally speaking, the seeds are organic, open pollinated, so there's, very, very good quality. Um, so far, anytime I've used them, which is probably every year for the last 5 years, I've bought different types of seeds off them, and they have been exceptional. So no hesitation in recommending Seeds Ireland. A brilliant, brilliant company. So now into the seed sowing guide, and as I said, because of weather patterns, the list of seeds, month to month can be very, very similar. So if we do the June sowing guide in 2026, it'll be very, very similar to 2025. But given little changes, they can tweak slightly, or how we sow things, when we sow things within the month can change. And what I mean by that is, if you take, as I say, the last April and May, they've been very, very cold. And sometimes when you sow in the likes of flower seeds, particularly in that kind of colder temperatures, nighttime temperatures quite cold, they can sit there and not do much. So you may well have your sowing done, by the recommendation on the back of the packet, but the seeds may not have done a lot in over the last couple of weeks. But if you can get them in early this month, given the temperatures that we have at the moment, very, very warm, no sign of any kind of colder temperatures, nothing below 10, 12 degrees, even at nighttime. And then your seeds will just hit the ground and go. And, so you can very easily catch up and pass out anything that was sowed a little bit earlier. So there's still time for lots to be sowed. And as I said, the fact that it was cold, some things that we would technically speak and say is a little bit late for, we could still go and sow and be very successful with them. So it's quite a big list, and we're going to get into it. It generally reduces. So May is the biggest month in terms of the list that we can sow, and June reduces slightly, but not a huge amount. And then as we go through into July and so on, that list does shrink as we go through. We're also now very much, while we're in the moment and sowing for the moment and sowing for the short term, we're also now starting to cast an eye to the back end of the year, to the autumn and to the winter, and even to the early spring. And we're starting to think about the sowing of crops for that autumn, winter, and early spring harvest. So we're always looking ahead. The other thing that can happen at this stage is that we're looking at our beds in the garden. These beds are quite, full, and we're possibly thinking, where am I actually going to put this stuff? There's nowhere to put it. But if you can picture 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks ahead, where you would be planting out maybe plug plants, then that that's where you need to be looking. So in 4 weeks' time, will that bed be cleared of the salads that are there or the cabbage and the cauliflower that's there? How far away are my potatoes from being harvested? That type of thing. So you're looking ahead 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and then you sow accordingly to make sure that you're filling that space according as a crop comes out, another one goes in, and that's how you get sort of longevity and harvest through the various months of the year. What we don't want to do is, get our seeds, get our plug plants, buy our, bits and pieces, fill our beds, then get a big blast of a harvest at a certain point in time, and then have nothing coming after that. We want to utilize this space. You've gone to the effort of creating the space. We really want to utilize it, and we really want to, I suppose, get the max from it. So we're casting an eye ahead. So I hope that kind of sets the tone. A couple of other points, like this week, the temperatures have been extraordinary and gone from where we had last week some kind of daytime temperatures like literally a week ago or a little more than a week ago. I was contemplating lighting the stove in the office because it was very cold. Um, and now, early this week we hit these 20 degrees, 24 degrees, 26 degrees, and 30 degrees in certain places. I saw the max min in the polytunnel. It was, a max of 46 degrees at one point in the polytunnel. Like that's crazy warm. So in terms of doing any kind of work or anything like that, it's very difficult. It's tricky because we didn't get time to acclimatize. We didn't get to go from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25. We just went from 10 to 30. And that big jump has made it hard for us to acclimatize, but it also has made it hard for plants to acclimatize. So just bear that in mind. The other thing is that certain things, like, for example, um, lettuce seed, as you know, won't germinate at a temperature above kind of 20 degrees. So if you've sowed your lettuce seeds and, as I said, the polytunnel, so if you've sowed them in your polytunnel and the temperature is hitting 36, 38 degrees in the polytunnel, then that germination, that seed goes into basically a state of dormancy, and they just will not germinate at those temperatures. So for something like that, you take that tray, you put it somewhere where it's protected and relatively warm, but not in that intense heat, because above 20, lettuce seed won't germinate. So you just have to watch that. The other thing to really watch out for, and it's absolutely critical at this stage, is watering. So obviously people are watering and watering heavily, but where this is really critical is on seedlings. So you sow your seed, your seedlings germinate quite quickly as they will with this heat. And that little seedling is so vulnerable to the temperatures that we have. The compost can dry in a matter of hours. So you need to make sure that you keep an eye on them, because you can do this sowing, have lovely germinated little seedlings, and then they're burnt to a crisp in a couple of hours. And you really need to watch that. A brilliant sort of a way of ensuring that is to have capillary matting. So you probably have heard me talking about it before. Capillary matting is essentially a fabric that sits on a bed. You would create your propagation bench, and you have something that creates a little ridge. Like, for example, in my one, I have a flat piece of 8 by 4 sheet. Around the edge of it, I have screwed in, right on the very edge of it, a 2 by 1 lat, so 2 inches tall, of a lat of timber. Then I insert into that a plastic sheet, so that it stops the water from escape, and I run that little sheet up the 2 by 1 on the side, and then that creates a little reservoir on the bed. Then you put your capillary matting on top of that, and the capillary matting, what that does, it basically distributes the water evenly across the bed. So even if it wasn't, now you need it relatively level, but if it wasn't 100% level, the capillary matting would still distribute the water across the bed, so that all the plants have access to the water. then it holds that water underneath. So where you have your trays, your pots, the water goes up through the base of the pots or through the base of the trays through a capillary action and then up to where the seedlings need it. And that's a brilliant way of ensuring, that they don't dry out. And you can like load in the water when you have this type of weather. You can really load in the water when weather is cold and there is no much transpiration or evaporation from the trays or from the plants themselves. Then having wet trays is a real problem because the plants just sit there and they can pick up diseases and they just get stagnated in that cold compost. But when it's as warm as it is at the minute, you can water heavily without any risk of you know disease or anything like that, because the evaporation and the transpiration from your seedlings is huge at this stage. So don't be afraid to fill that. Let the trays get quite heavy with water, and then you're guaranteed that there is enough there for your little seedlings and your little plants as they grow, and it'll just keep them safe over a 24-hour or 48-hour period if you're not able to keep watering them all the time. And it's a brilliant thing to have, especially when we get the weather that we had this week. So anyway, all of that, let's get into the actual seeds that we can sow. And as I say, it's quite a big month, and I'll group them again as I always do. So firstly, we'll group into the kind of salads, and these are the ones that we're repeat sowing pretty much all the time. So spring onion, always on the list, will always be on the list because it's, for me here, it's used all the time. Um, Now you don't have to sow it every week. So, because it's quite good in that it won't run to seed massively fast, you can do kind of one sowing a month and sow enough that you're going to have a month of a harvest, and then you'll have your next batch on the way, and you're always able to have some. But because it doesn't run to seed massively quick or anything, you can kind of do enough that's going to last you for a month. So that's what I do, one sowing a month on something like that. Spinach now, on the other hand, is totally the opposite. So spinach at this stage of the year, especially in the tunnel, which is where I grow it, that'll run to seed so quickly. So I'll do regular sowing, maybe every 2 weeks of that. And that will, and you want to be harvesting it, because once that's finished, you'll go from a baby spinach leaf to quite a big one in a matter of days, and then it'll go to seed again within a matter of days. So from time of first harvest of a baby leaf to actually gone to seed, maximum 2 weeks at this stage of the year. Just the temperatures are just driving that growth really fast. So spinach is a repeat sow every couple of weeks, every 2 weeks, thereabouts. Radish is another one, same thing. Very fast growing, very fast from sowing to maturity. And at this stage of the year, it's at its fastest point from sowing to maturity. So again, you're repeat sowing, a little bit like the spinach. As mentioned before, radish is something that I love for certain times, but I don't want it all the time. So I kind of dip in and out. I'll sow for a little while, do a couple of sowings, eat it for a little while. Then I don't mind not having it for a few weeks, and then I go again. And I don't like it all the time. I get fed up with it for some reason. Love the taste of it, but just not constant. Whereas spinach I will have all the time. Turnip is another one. I kind of do one sowing. It's very quick. It likes the Milan purple tops. It's very quick to maturity as well. Not as quick as radish, but still quite quick. Um, and then it does kind of go and bolt quite quickly after that. I don't love them either. So again, just one sowing or maybe two sowings a year is all I'll ever do of a turnip. Next one on the list is lettuce. Sow that quite regularly. At the moment, I'm using kind of smart harvesting. So I have Little Gem, I have Butterhead, the one that I love, and Annalena. I have a Wonder of All Seasons, and I have a crispy or a curly leafed green lettuce. And I have, maybe 5, 6 heads of each of them. So rather than harvesting the head, I'm going around the outside, I'm taking leaves all the time. The plant continues to try and form a head, but you keep taking the outer leaves. So when I go out to harvest for a salad, I'll take 3 or 4 leaves off the outside of a butterhead, the same off a Little Gem, the same off a crispy one, the same off a Wonder of All Seasons. And now what you have is you have a mixture of 4 or 5 different types of salad leaves that can be all chopped up in a chopped salad or whatever. And the plant itself, I'm not harvesting the heads, so the plant itself is still going to produce, still going to give harvest over the next while. And it's a way of extending out the sowing. So now I don't need to sow every single month. I'll probably sow every 6 weeks of lettuce. Now, temperatures that we've had, you will definitely end up at a point where you're doing the smart harvesting, but the head is still looking to drive up, and you can get bolting quite quickly. But you don't need to sow it as regularly, maybe as something like a spinach. So that's a really good technique to extend out and I suppose lessen the workload of sowing. Uh, Now, I mentioned as well that we have an eye to the autumn, we have an eye to the winter, and this is where towards the end of this month we can start sowing, our autumn type salads. And again, you're looking at things like mustards and rocket and so on. And they're the ones that are going to take us for a harvest later in the year. Now, depending on the temperatures, you might actually push that into early July, but you are now thinking about the autumn. Yeah, and that will be for some people who are, as I say, where all their beds are full of vegetables at the minute, that will be difficult to kind of think ahead. But if you can think ahead now and throw an eye to the future, you will ensure that you've harvest over a longer period of time. So that's kind of your salads. And then we move on to, our brassicas, and from now on, we're really getting plants set up for our autumn and winter. We are thinking longer term here. These are slower to mature, need a good bit of space, some of them, but these are going to be harvests from, sort of early autumn right into winter time. So we're looking at Brussels sprouts, probably the last chance to get those in. You want to be getting those in now. They're a long developing crop. Uh, but you probably need to do, you need to get them in now in order to have any chance of having them, for example, for Christmas. Um, but you're talking long term, so you need somewhere to put them in the next couple of weeks. Kale is another one, very good one. Um, Personally, I don't love kale for a start, but I also won't be sowing a lot of kale going forward because I have now got some perennial kale. I've got the Taunton Dean and the Dubonton, or I think it's called Dubonton, and they're gone into the ground, not harvesting them yet, but that's potentially what I'll be doing for kale over the next couple of years. So experimenting with some of the perennial veg. On the cabbage front, we're looking ahead again. We're looking at autumn type cabbages. You can still sow the likes of a pint of York cabbage. That'll be kind of for August harvest time. But looking ahead past that, you're looking at things like red cabbage, you're looking at Savoy, and they're your autumn stroke winter harvests. Again, the next one is the same thing. Purple sprouting broccoli or green sprouting broccoli. They're going to be a beautiful harvest in the winter months. So potentially December, January, February. That's your kind of time frame of harvest. So it's a long game that you're playing with these, and you are looking into the future. But this is what will give you that extension of harvest. Another one on the list is Calibres, which is your good big green Calibres. They What you're sowing now is the autumn varieties, and these are going to be for September type harvests, September and even into early October. But again, we're looking down the road here. Cauliflower is the same thing. We're switching now from our really early maturing varieties to our later maturing varieties, and that's going to give you that harvest into the back end of the year. But the next one is the same thing. We're looking at leeks, and again, we're looking at our autumn and winter leeks. So again, a crop for down the line. Root vegetables then, parsnips. I only do one sowing a year of parsnips, and I'll be doing that in the next week. You do need to sow these in the early part of the month. Anything past, sort of the third week of June is very, very late. Um, but at the moment, it's perfect. Ground temperatures have come up enough. Up until now, it wouldn't have been an ideal time to sow parsnips. There was too much fluctuation in temperatures. It's steady now. Make sure you're using fresh seed. So parsnip has to be a fresh seed, has to be seed bought within that year. And again, for me, one sowing, and I actually only harvested the very last of last year's sowing about 3 weeks ago. So when I was getting the bed ready to flip it out into new crops, I took out the last of them. They were starting to bolt, but the parsnips themselves were fine. And yeah, that's the last of them used now. And yeah, you just get a long time out of them. You leave them sit in the ground, not much work. Do one sowing. Again, it's a long game. You're tying up ground for a little bit of time with the likes of parsnips, but they give you that autumn, that lovely autumn and winter and early spring harvest of the following year. Swede is another one. So again, a winter crop, hearty vegetable that you'll have at that time of the year, and that's one that you can get in and get sowed now. Beetroot, another one. So this is a sowing outside, and that's going to give you a harvest in the back end of the year. I'll do another sowing in the polytunnel later in the time, and that will be, that'll be for sort of autumn time as well. So you can get, by doing a couple of different sowings in a different way, you can get different harvest periods. Carrots, again, that's the last of the root vegetables, and we are again switched to an autumn or something like an autumn king at this stage of the year. Uh, they're the main ones for the back end of the year, so harvest through September, October, and again around the same time, and maybe a little bit earlier, I took out the last of my carrots out of the ground. So a couple of sowings, first sowing of carrots I do in the tunnel. I'm just about to start harvesting those, and then I get a little period of time out of them, and then the autumn ones will be, they'll be kind of taking me through the winter of a harvest. Herbs, then pretty much all the herbs can be sown now. We especially can be sown and should be sown the likes of basil, which will pair with our tomatoes when they're ripe in a few weeks' time. Coriander can be sowed. That's going to be a regular sowing if you use a lot of it. I don't here, so I only sow it an odd time. Chervil, dill, parsley, all of those. Parsley I have to sow again. So I've had parsley both flat and curly in the tunnel. And they're now into their second season and they're biennial, so they're starting to run the seed. So now I resow, get new plants, and the cycle starts again. So I only do a sowing every so often on those. Then onto kind of a couple of kind of leafy vegetables, pak choi, something I'm almost never successful with. I've grown it a few times, just doesn't seem to do well. Just haven't had any luck with it. Will try it again, but yeah, it's not one I've had huge success with. Chard, uh, definite definite plant every year, but I don't sow a lot of it. So at the moment, I have about 8 plants on the go in the tunnel. I'm harvesting off a couple of the couple of new ones at the minute, and I have then some smaller ones on coming behind it, and they'll take me right through to next spring. So I'll have a constant harvest off them right through to next spring. So kind of 1 or 2 sowings a year is all I do with those. But if you haven't got chard, it's a brilliant vegetable to have in your garden, and it's one that you can still sow this month. Celery you can still sow. As mentioned before, celery is a tricky one to grow. So if you don't use a lot of celery, then maybe the simplest thing is to get a tray of plants. But if you do sow it, it's a good month to sow it in. But it needs to be again in the earlier part of the month and get it out and get it sown and get it into the ground as soon as possible. It needs light to germinate, so you don't cover it when you sow the seed. And it needs good solid temperatures, which you should be able to get now, which you wouldn't have had over the last month. Can be quite tricky unless you have, a heated propagator or something that will keep the temperature consistent. A couple of the warmer crops then, cucumber still be sown, very, very quick to grow at this stage of the year. Sow seed now and you can plant it out in a couple of weeks' time in the tunnel. Courgettes is another one, again, very, very fast. You won't need a lot of those, so don't go sowing 10 of them or you'll have a glut that you won't be able to deal with. 1 or 2, typically for a family, 1 or 2 courgette plants is loads. Sweet corn is another one. I only do one sowing a year. I plant it into the polytunnel, and that's where I allow it to, mature. Works really well every year. Something that kind of comes as a treat. You get that harvest, you have it for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then it's gone, and that's it. Now I know you can store them a little bit, but generally speaking, I use it and I treat it as a kind of a nice little block of a seasonal veg that you have for a period of time, and then you move on. French beans is another one. They love the warm temperatures that we have at the moment, so they can still be sown, bush varieties or climbing varieties. Pumpkin and squash, again, they'll be really, really fast to grow at this stage of the year once the temperatures are up. They would not have liked the cold temperatures of last week or the week before. Just wouldn't like it at all. So pumpkin and squash will hit the ground now and away they'll go. Peas can still be sowed as well, and that kind of more or less wraps up the kind of veg or the edible garden. And as I say, still quite a lot on it. And just given that last month was so cold, it is slightly, tweaked to what it could be in a different year. So, depends on how the year has progressed. And the back of the packet, it'll give you a recommendation, but you still need to understand yourself, February through to May. Well, okay, if April and May were really, really cold, then it might make sense to stick in some in early June once the temperatures are good. So you can move and tweak. It doesn't have to be rigidly, we have to sow in this window. It can tweak and move slightly. So that's a good list. There's still loads on it. I know some of you probably have your beds full now at the minute and you're thinking, I can't sow anymore. But remember that those crops will be coming out in maybe, some of them will be coming out in 4 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, 6 weeks' time. And just to ensure that you have something sown that's going to fill those spots. So the day you take out your potatoes, you have your leeks ready to go in there or, something like that. Utilize the space, get more than one crop out of a bed, get several crops if you can, and then you're utilizing, the space that you have. Switching over to flowers now, again, same thing. Some of these, technically speaking, you wouldn't, by the back of the packet, they'll be saying don't sow after May. But given, again, the weather that we've had, we can still sow. Just a note on that. So I sowed Cosmos last month and germinated brilliantly. The growing media for seeds, there's just some awful rubbish out there in the market. I'm not going to name the brand, but it was really annoying. They've germinated quite well. Funny enough, as I was filling the trays, I didn't like the feel of the compost. I just didn't like it. It didn't look a nice color, didn't feel like a nice compost, and germinated quite well, very well actually. So good seeds, but what has happened since is that they've just stagnated. Now they're tiny at the minute, they're not growing at all, and I do need to get them into a different growing media to really drive them on. So that's something that I've like. It really frustrates me when something is called, a seed sowing growing media, and it's just not fit for purpose. Anything, any kind of media will germinate a seed, but that growing piece, for the week or 10 days afterwards, I just find that sometimes you get those composts and they just stagnate, and that has what happened with Cosmos. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but it is important if you find one that works and that you're happy with, try and stick to that, and hopefully it's consistent. The reason I had the one that I always use, I was somewhere where they didn't have that one, and I just grabbed another bag, and yeah, I know next time I'll stick with the one I usually use. So on the flower front, because of the weather, we can still get some good success from annuals at this stage, and like so calendula, cornflower, Nagelia, Cosmos, as I mentioned, like my ones have just stagnated in the tray. If I sowed them again in the proper compost, they would just burst out of it and be ready to go out into the ground in a couple of weeks' time and flower relatively quickly. Okay, you might lose a little bit of the window, but generally speaking, there's still time. Sunflower is another one because of the speed; they'll just fly along. Stock can still be grown, honesty can still be grown. Flipping across the perennials, pretty much a lot of the perennials can be grown now. Chances are you wouldn't get a flower off them this year, but at least they will germinate. At least they will form a good solid plant that can go into the ground, and then they can be planted in, and you get the real benefit as early as they flower next year. So, for example, Aegelias you could sow now. Um, they're unlikely to flower in this year, but come next spring they'll be flowering at this stage, and they'll have formed into a good strong plant at that stage. So you can still be sowing. It doesn't mean, as I said, the packet might say not suitable for whatever month, but you can still sow. Once you can create that plant, especially on things like perennials, um, there's still benefit in doing it. So perennials that can be sowed, as I say, a lot of them can, but just to name a few, you have the likes of lupins, you have echinaceas, agelias, achilleas, bellis, um, some of the biennials, the likes of a foxglove, sweet William, they can be sowed. And even to something like wallflowers, for example, highly underrated flower, they can be sown. You won't get any great benefit out of them this year, but you'll definitely get the benefit next year as well. So, there's lots that can be sown over the whole month when you take into account the vegetables, the herbs, and the flowers. So keep sowing, keep filling up those spaces, or keep an eye down the road where you can have something coming to fill these spaces. A reminder again, this Saturday, the 30th of June, I am speaking at Bloom in the Eat Well Garden. So it's the polytunnel series of talks. And I have two talks, 10:30 to 11 on composting and 12:30 to 1 on no-dig gardening. And I would love if any of you guys are at Bloom on Saturday to come up and say hello, support the talk. Be lovely to meet some of you. Mentioned loads of times before that, on the podcast, we never get to interact other than email or message on social media or whatever. So it'd be lovely to meet some of you there. If you are there, pop over to that area. 10:30 to 11, first talk, 12:30 to 1 for the second talk. There's so many good speakers at Bloom this year, just looking across the main stages. I saw Elma, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago from the potting or the poppy garden. She's speaking. Niall Gardens is speaking. Dermot Gavin is speaking. There's Adam Frost is there. There's so many great speakers. Don't have the full schedule in front of me, but it's over the course of the what is it? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, 4 days, 5 days. Over the 5 days, it's there's some amazing speakers and loads of variety of talks as well. So check those out. But for my talks, 10:30 to 11 and 12:30 to 1, the Polytunnel talk schedule is where it falls under, and it's in the Eat Well Garden. So as I say, hoping to meet some of you there. Before we sign off on this month's June sowing guide, a big thanks to our sponsor, Seeds Ireland. The link for Seeds Ireland is in the show notes. And yeah, that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.